Happy Monday, everyone. This is Martha with Nature Niche, and this week I want to share a beautiful wildflower, common boneset. The scientific name is Eupatorium perfoliatum, and it is our only native boneset in Michigan besides the state-threatened upland boneset, Eupatorium sessilifolium. Both of these species are in the aster family. And common boneset is a native perennial forb and is a typical wetland species found in marshes and swales, wet fields, along lake shores, fens, deciduous and coniferous swamps, thickets, moist clearings along river and stream banks. And you'll find it across both the lower and upper peninsulas in Michigan. And here I'm sharing it from one of my favorite places. This is limestone cobble shore and Elvar along the north side of Lake Huron in the Lachino Islands area near Cedarville along Bush Bay. And this species more broadly ranges across the eastern half of the United States and Canada as well. As far as horticulture goes, this species grows about 2 to 5 feet tall, and it prefers full sun to part sun and definitely moist to wet soil conditions with good organic matter content. It can withstand short periods of temporary flooding, but it's not truly aquatic, so you won't find this along pond edges or out in emergent wetlands in standing water where the water remains through the growing season. But it can do well in rain gardens where it's moist, but the water doesn't stand for very long. It does fine in average garden soils as well. And the foliage is relatively free of pests and diseases. This species blooms from July through September here in Michigan. And usually for a given colony, those flowers last 1 to 2 months, and there's a nice floral fragrance. This species spreads readily via rhizomes, and it has a very fibrous root system. So it's a clone former, but it doesn't stray too far from those moist or wet soil conditions. So you should give it room to spread, but know that it'll stay where those soil conditions remain moist. It is easy to divide and transplant in the spring or the fall. And you can collect and sow the seeds in the fall. You'll want to plant the seed pretty heavily because this species is known for lower germination rates. The seeds require 70 to 85 degree Fahrenheit temperatures and sunlight for good germination. As far as identification goes, it does get 2 to 5 feet tall, and that stem tends to be unbranched except towards the top where it divides for the flower heads. The stem is covered in long white hairs, and it appears to perforate the fused opposite leaves. So that botanical term is perfoliate. And it's also a reason that another common name for the species is thoroughwort, because the stem appears to be going through the leaves. The leaves are up to 8 inches long and 2 inches across. They have serrate margins and a very long tapering tip. The leaf bases are fused and go completely around the stem of the plants, and the leaves are very deeply impressed with their venation, so it gives the plant a very reptilian look, I think. And the leaves are also quite hairy. The upper leaves may be sessile, so that means stalkless, but not fused. But if you look along the lower part of the plant, all those leaves will be wrapped around the stem. The stem terminates in flat-topped clusters of white flower heads that can be 2 to 8 inches across, and the individual flower heads about 1/6 of an inch across and is composed of approximately 15 disc florets. So this species does not have ray florets as do some other things in the aster family. Each of the disc florets has 5 spreading lobes and a long divided style. And this gives the flower head a fuzzy, I think, nice fluffy look to it. The fruit are a small cypsely, and those have small tufts of hairs, and the plant is generally wind dispersed. As far as faunal associates go, the flowers produce pollen and very readily accessible nectar, and this attracts many kinds of insects like bees, flies, wasps, butterflies, and beetles. And common boneset is a host plant to many species of moths. Looking at the native plant finder, it was showing me 32 different moth species just in the Midland, Michigan area alone. The stems are used as nest sites, so they hollow out by pollinators like our solitary bees. And this species is relatively deer and rabbit resistant as mammals avoid the bitter tasting foliage. The seeds may be eaten by swamp sparrows and other small birds as well. As far as historical uses go, European settlers thought that common boneset was pretty much a cure-all in the 18th and 19th centuries, and the fact that the stem pokes through the leaves made it so that the early herb doctors thought that it was useful in setting bones, and so they would wrap the leaves among the splint bandages for folks that had broken bones. The Native Americans used boneset to treat respiratory infections, fevers, poor digestion, and rheumatic pains. And it's been used for hundreds of years to treat influenza and help relieve body pain that accompanies high fevers. All the plant parts can be used to make teas and tonics, and it is a stimulating tonic, anti-inflammatory, and an antispasmodic diaphoretic, and it's used to treat flu symptoms like night sweats and achy bones, fever, upper respiratory congestion, muscular rheumatism, and constipation. And another common name for this species is feverwort. And for boneset, there's the idea of a doctrine of signatures. So back in the olden days, they thought that plants that looked like certain body parts, so the fused leaves looked like fused bones, it was thought that these look-alike plants could treat those body parts. And so it was famously used to treat bone break fever, also known as dengue fever, a long time ago. In modern times, this plant has great landscape value, as you can see by the bees and this cute little skipper enjoying the nectar. This plant makes a great late season pollinator support, and It's a tough plant in places like rain gardens because it can tolerate temporary flooding, and it's nice that it does have some deer and rabbit resistance with that bitter foliage. So a pretty adaptable plant for those average to moist soil places. So I hope you can get out and look for it in a wetland near you, or consider adding it to the wet places in your yard, perhaps a ditch or drainage swale nearby. Take care and have a good week.